for me to get the answers that I really wanted, for me to become the person that I wanted to be, I needed to know if this journey, this life, this world had reason behind it, had a purpose. Were we here for a specific reason? Did God exist? Because I felt like the answer was clear. If God existed, there's a reason to my life. There's a purpose behind my life. My life is sacred. But if God didn't exist, this was all just a random act of nature and my life was meaningless. Welcome to Stranded in the Wind, a podcast about purpose, awakening, and the sacred storms that shape us. I'm Canyon. And each week I sit down with storytellers who turned fear into fuel and found their path through the unknown. This isn't just about where you've been, but why you're here. It's time to tell your story, and it's time to heal the world. Y'all, this is my very first podcast, and I am so excited to completely be changing the direction of my life and to bring forth the stories of my life and the stories of others. You see, my life has been redirected many times in my life, but as far as this chapter in my life, I realized that it is going to be so important and so crucial for me to start this podcast up and tell my story and allow a platform for others to tell their story, because our stories are so important and crucial to heal ourselves and to help others heal the traumas and the fears that they are trying to overcome. You see, I started a podcast a couple years ago, and I didn't realize at the time, but I was kind of already doing what it is that I'm doing now. It's funny because I look back in my old journals, and over and over and over again, I had written, start a podcast. And I just didn't realize how important and how crucial that would be to my journey at the time. And here I am 5, 6, 7 years later, and I'm realizing how crucial this podcast is going to be for myself and for those that are listening right now. It's funny to look back at my journal again and think, if I would have just started this at the time that I had the revelation of starting it, that I had the epiphany of starting it, I'd be 5, 6 years in the future. I was just talking to my friend about this, about how, to reference the Bible, to reference, the story of Moses, and when Moses rescued the Israelites from Egypt and promised to take them to the promised lands, and was listening to the voice of God telling them exactly what they needed to do. It was supposed to take the Israelites 11 to 13 days to reach the promised land. And because they defied what God had told them, it took them 40 years. And I think about this with my own life. And I think about this epiphany that I had years and years ago about starting a podcast and all the ideas that I've had and how it takes me so long to actually start these ideas. It makes me wonder, how long have I been in the wilderness? How long have I been avoiding the request and the vision that God has given me to create something profound in my life? How long have I been walking in the wilderness? So I'm creating this podcast because I think it's so crucial for people to tell their story. And I'm a big believer of we are all heroes of our own journey, even if we don't realize it right now. And by telling your story, you create a route into your purpose that you may not have realized existed at the time. If you tell your story fully and with all of your heart, and don't worry about trying to be the best storyteller or avoid certain parts of your story. Tell your story exactly how it was, how it happened, and how it made you into who you are today. What was life like growing up for me? I was in a family of 5 kids. It was me, my 2 sisters, and my 2 brothers. I have a twin sister. My older brothers are also twins, and we have an older sister. My mom was a single mom working 3 jobs to raise all of us. And I pretty much spent all of my time as a child playing sports. I was a 3 sport athlete. I played multiple sports during every season. I remember having to go to football practice and then wrestling practice or baseball or whatever it was that I was doing. I was always playing sports. As a child, I pretty much always knew that I was different. I knew that I was supposed to lead because when I said things, people listened. And even as a young kid, I could tell that people listened. And as I grew up, I realized that I started watching these motivational speakers, and I realized that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to inspire people to pursue their dreams and to pursue the lives that they wanted to live. I didn't really realize this at the time, but this is what I knew I wanted to do. As a child, I had a lot of really intense dreams. I had a lot of night terrors, and I found myself waking up screaming, and I thought about death a lot. And for a young person, a young kid, 5, 6 years old, I don't think this is really a normal thing to be thinking about. I never really lost anybody in my life as a young kid, but death was always something I thought about. It was always something that I was so scared of and I had so much fear around, and my nightmares always had to do with death, with the people around me dying or me dying or skeletons or things that involved death. And so this was always a curiosity of mine. I grew up very Christian, and I grew up, technically we went to a Methodist church, but my mom is from the deep south, the bayou of Louisiana. So the type of Christianity that I feel like was instilled into us was very passionate, very fear based, very love God, accept Jesus, or burn for eternity in hell. I found myself thinking about hell a lot and what that looked like and how did that really exist? How could people burn for eternity? How could God give the option of going to hell, and how could it be so detrimental for our souls for eternity? It was something that I thought about all the time, and I think this really was an extreme reason that caused me to think about death so much, because I wondered about death. I wondered about hell. I wondered about what the reality of that was. As I got a little bit older, I started diving in. I mean, I'm talking 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I started diving into what this looked like. I got on YouTube and I started looking into things like lucid dreaming and astral projection. And if you don't know what lucid dreaming or astral projection is, lucid dreaming is basically the ability to become aware in your dream that you're actually dreaming. So it's like waking up in your dream, realizing that you're dreaming, and being able to take control of exactly what's happening in your dream. And as you get better and better and have the ability to wake up more and more in your dream, you actually can change the course of your dream. It's like, imagine a movie is playing and you are the director of the movie. You can either sit back and watch the movie and see how it rolls out, or you can actually change certain things of the movie, of the dream. And so I became really, really invested in learning about lucid dreaming. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I thought it was magical that we could wake up inside of our dream and control what happened. If I wanted to fly in a dream, I could do that. If I wanted to meet a celebrity in a dream, I could do that. And to me, this was the coolest thing ever. That led me down the path of learning about what astral projection was. If you don't know what astral projection is, it's the idea that you are actually able to consciously leave your body, your spirit or your soul leaves your body, and you're able to explore the spirit realm or the astral realm or the realm around you. It gets kind of complicated, but it's the idea basically you can leave your body and explore the spirit realm. Well, for someone who is very deep rooted in Christianity and the belief of Jesus and God and very traditional viewpoints on this, when I brought this up to my family, I got a much different reaction than I thought that I was going to get. I thought, how cool is it that we can lucid dream? How cool is it that we have the ability to leave our body? No one ever told me this. No one ever expressed this to me. And so when I found this on my own, I just thought this was the coolest thing. This was the answer, for people that were struggling with their belief into the afterlife. Well, this right here proved that. For those that wanted to explore the realms of this world and what our bodies were fully capable of doing, lucid dreaming was such a cool idea that we were able to pursue and to take hold of our dreams. Like, it just, to me, it was such a cool thing to do. But again, when I brought this up to my family, I did not get the reaction that I thought I was going to get. I was told that this was the work of the devil. I was told that this was not something that we needed to pursue, and that all we needed was God. Push this aside and stop pursuing these acts because it was not of God. So as I began to get older and I got into high school, I remember talking to people about lucid dreaming and astral projection all the time. It wasn't just something I thought about and stopped thinking about. I never stopped thinking about this. It was something that I was so interested in. I felt like everyone needed to know about this. I felt like everyone needed to know exactly what this was, that it was a possibility, that we had the ability to do this. And I started trying to understand what my goal was from this and what I believed God's plan was when it came to doing this. As I got a little bit older, I started to think that this was God's way of allowing us to connect deeper. And so as I started bringing this up to people that I knew that were Christian over and over and over again, I felt like I was condemned more and more about bringing this up and how this was the work of the devil. This was the work of Satan. And this led me down an entire path of trying to understand who God was, if God existed, if the devil existed, and what that meant for me and my life in the future. Well, in the summer of 2018, I had just finished my first year of college. I was getting ready to go into a program called AmeriCorps NCCC, where I would live in California and work with nonprofits for a year. At the time, I felt like I had finally discovered what I believed about God, what I believed about the universe and what that was in my heart and my head. And I started to believe that religion and spirituality were pretty much a choice, that you didn't have to choose one specifically to get to God, but that you could kind of mix up your own, and that God spoke to us in his own way, and that we really had the ability to be fluid when it came to spirituality and religion. Well, that same summer, my older sister was also on a very similar path, looking for truth. And all of a sudden, she found Jesus. And this turned my world upside down, because I watched her life change. I watched the bad become good. And I found that she became a completely different person in such a positive way. And so this really was hard for me, because it made me question my own relationship with God. It made me question my own relationship with Jesus, and that I wasn't doing enough as a Christian. I wasn't doing the works that I was supposed to be doing, because I wasn't spoken to by God the same way that my sister was. I didn't see my life change the same that I saw my sister's life change. And so it made me question, was God even real? Was this just a figment of my sister's imagination? Did God really have a hold of my life? Or were we just random, acts of nature? Were we just random pieces of dust in the wind? The song Dust in the Wind by Kansas always really spoke to me. And that year I really understood why, because I started to think perhaps we really are just dust in the wind. Well, the key point of my life really changing was October 10th, I believe it was. I'm on a flight to Sacramento, California. And while I'm on this flight, I'm thinking about my favorite movie, Forrest Gump. And all of a sudden, I had this epiphany. I was going to walk across America. And this idea of mine, it felt so profound. It gave me purpose. It gave me reason. And I was going to answer the question that I've been wondering for years. Did God exist? Or were we truly just random acts of nature? And so I started telling everybody, I'm going to walk across America. When this program is over, I'm going to walk from Sacramento back to DC, back to Baltimore, back to where I was from. And at first it was just an idea. And I just kept saying it over and over. And I started to become known as the guy who was going to walk across the country. And when I told my mom, when I told my dad this, they were pissed. They told me that absolutely not. You're not walking across the country. You're going to be killed. You're going to be, robbed at gunpoint, or this, and that. The more people I told, the more stories of fear that I was getting. I was told all the different ways I was going to be killed, or I was going to be kidnapped by a serial killer. And my mom told me there's worse things than death. You better not do this. You better not do this. You better stop. And I felt like this journey was part of my destiny. And so I just kept saying I was going to walk across the country. As the year went on, I started to meet people who were in support of this journey. For me, I knew that this journey had to take place for me to get the answers that I really wanted, for me to become the person that I wanted to be. I needed to know if this journey, this life, this world had reason behind it, had a purpose. Were we here for a specific reason? Did God exist? Because I felt like the answer was clear. If God existed, there's a reason to my life. There's a purpose behind my life. My life is sacred. But if God didn't exist, this was all just a random act of nature and my life was meaningless. That none of this really even mattered, and that everything I did was just random chemicals firing in my brain. It was just random acts of nature. And if that was the case, I didn't know what I was supposed to do at that point. The biggest battle for me was, did my life have purpose? I needed to know if there was a reason behind everything that I was doing, if there was what's called the butterfly effect, if my acts affected other people down the line, if the work that I did to help others really made a difference in the world, or if this was just bogus, if this was just random. I needed to know, did God exist? I wasn't quite to the point where I needed to understand about religion. I wasn't really to the point where I needed to understand about what part of God's words were true, about if the Bible was real, if the Bible wasn't real. It was really just about my connection with God, my connection with the Almighty, with divinity, with the Most High. I needed to know, was there truly a connection between me and a higher power? You see, there was so much in my mind about the things that I thought about. I went down the rabbit hole with so many different things. I looked into conspiracy theories about the reptilians and who controlled the government and the flat earth theory, and I looked into the Anunnaki and the ancient tablets of Mesopotamia and all these different things. And at this point in my life, all I needed to know was, did God exist? Did I have a connection with a higher power that was helping guide my life? If I put myself in a position where I had absolutely nothing on this walk across America, would God lift me up with his hands and guide me and protect me along this journey, or would something truly treacherous happen to me? The way that I overcame this fear was just step by step, walking forward, walking into my path. And the crazy thing about this walk across America was that everyone was so fearful for me. Everyone was so scared about what this journey was going to entail, what kind of fear based life, what kind of horrible things were going to happen to me. But what nobody ever asked me was, Canyon, are you scared? Because if they would have, I would have told them, absolutely, I'm scared. I'm terrified. But this is something that I know that I need to do. So the only way for me to truly get this answer was to walk directly into fear. The moment everything changed was truly my walk across the country. Because once I discovered that God did exist and that there was a higher power guiding my journey, lifting me up, I knew that my journey, that my life really did have purpose, that there was a sacred purpose behind my life, and that I was here for something so profound and so powerful that only by walking in my path, in my divine path, was I going to discover what I truly was here for. Once I left my walk, unfortunately, I was not able to fully accomplish it. I made it from California to about the border of Texas. Unfortunately, winter started coming, so I started having to move south. And of course, this really prolonged the journey because at first I was going straight across, but then I had to cut down into the southern hemisphere because it was getting really cold. I was really terrified of getting hit with a blizzard, and that's surely a way that I totally could have died. Once I left this journey of walking across America, once I discovered that my life did have purpose and that God or a higher power was guiding my journey, I moved to Hawaii and I lived on a fruit farm out there, and I basically lived off the land. I had $5 to my pocket when I left to go to Hawaii. When I was hungry, I would go and grab fruit off the trees. I literally lived off the land. And as somebody who's from the city, it was the most profound thing I feel like I've ever done. Living so close to nature. I mean, I didn't wear shoes, I didn't wear a shirt. I woke up every day to the sunrise and I just walked barefoot in the yard. And again, the power that you get and the energy that you get by walking to an orange tree or a starfruit tree and grabbing fruit from the tree and literally just biting into it. There's so much power in this. And this really showed me that this was part of my journey by trying to show this to people in the future. What I realized from being there was that showing people the power of living with nature was going to be crucial to my journey. And unfortunately, I'm not quite there yet. And I have such a beautiful plan for the future, and that is to come very soon or within the next few years. I know that it's going to happen. I'm just not exactly sure how it's going to happen. But I do know that my journey forward is to show people how crucial our connection with nature is and how we're supposed to get back to nature. As far as this chapter in my life, I know that telling my story is exactly where I need to be. I know that creating a platform for others to tell their story is crucial to healing the world, and that it is my duty to create this podcast, whether I get 5 listeners or 5,000 listeners, that it's my sacred duty to make this podcast and to express to you how important telling your story is, how sacred telling your story is, because telling your story allows people who may be experiencing what you experienced in the past that you overcame, they may be experiencing that right now. And by telling your story, you can help heal them, show them that there truly is a light at the end of the tunnel, and show them that you may be going through pain right now. You may be experiencing fear or trauma or whatever it is that you're going through, but there truly is a light at the end of the tunnel. There truly is something sacred on the other side of this journey, that your fear or your trauma can be turned into gold. You can truly become an alchemist of your journey. And it's not always a bad thing when bad things happen to you. By going through this fire, you become the phoenix. You become reborn from the ashes. And by expressing your story, by telling your story to others, you can not only heal yourself, but heal others that are going through a very similar path that you have overcome. My hope from this podcast is, one, to overcome what I really struggle with, and that is consistency. I know that for me, it is so important to create a place for you, the viewer, for other people to tell their story and to make sure that I'm staying on top of this, because I know that this is part of my sacred journey. If I could go back and tell my past self one thing, I would tell myself to just be okay with the process. Not everything needs to get done right away. Write down the ideas that you have and put them in the archive, because you're gonna have time. Okay? Time is sacred. Time is something we don't seem to be able to get enough of, but I promise you, there's enough of it. For those listening, the thing that has really transpired my life and helped me keep a log of my thoughts and of the pains, the sorrows, the times of joy, keeping a journal. I think that this is truly such a beautiful thing. And now I'm looking at it now. I have 7 or 8 journals filled with thoughts of mine, of epiphanies of mine, stories of mine, experiences of mine, heartbreaks, all the moments that made me into who I am. And so I can go back to 2019 and open a journal and see where my mindset was at the time, to see that the same things that I want to do now, I was already writing down at the time. God was already speaking to me, and God's been telling me the same thing over and over and over again for years, like Moses and the Israelites. How long was God speaking to them, telling them the same thing over and over, and yet every single time they did what they wanted to do. They didn't do what God told them to do. They didn't do what the divine, what the Almighty told them to do. And because of that, they were wandering in the wilderness. Just like me, for years, I've been wandering in the wilderness. And maybe you have been wandering in the wilderness. But it's time to do that thing that you've been putting off for so long. It's time to start that business that you've been so scared to start. God puts these things on our hearts because they are part of our sacred path. And so I ask you, start. Start by telling your story. Start by telling people what you've been through, the traumas that you've faced, the pains that you've overcome, the fears that you have looked in the eyes and overcome. It's time to tell your story. It's time to heal the world. And for that, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I had a lot of this written down, but most of it I went off of what I felt like my heart needed to tell you, what I felt like God was having me try to tell you. And I can't wait to dive into this journey with you, the viewer, and allow other people to express their journeys and their stories. Because remember, your story is sacred. Your story matters.